First off, thanks to each of you for being here. Like Sridhar said, I'm super passionate about design, and any opportunity I get to speak about it is just an opportunity that I can't miss. So we're going to switch gears. This is just hopefully a fun presentation, something a little lighter than the discussion we've had so far. And so what are we talking about today, right? We're talking about persuasive design. Now, when we talk about persuasive design, the first question is, why is there so much conversation around design now, right? Because the industry's been there for a while, but suddenly in the last couple of years, maybe the last decade if you stretch it, there's been a lot more conversation, a lot more emphasis on design. Why is that, right? So that's something I want to dive into first. So design matters more than ever now. Why? So let's understand why by looking at a couple of industries, right? So this is a very quick snapshot of how the car industry, the automobile industry has evolved. Now, automobiles came out, towards the end of the 19th century, so between 1880 to 1920. That was when the first couple of automobiles came out, right? And 1920 is when the very first mass-manufactured car came out. So that's the Ford Model T. You see the last car at the topmost row, the black one, that's the Ford Model T, right? So this was the era when automobiles came out and all the innovation was in technology. So, people are trying out different kinds of combustion engines, people are talking about different kinds of horsepower, they were laying down fundamental infrastructure like road networks, all that was happening and that took a good 40, 50 years to happen, right? So that's the first era. Then as time progressed, around the time when World War II happened, so between 1930s to 1950s, the industry evolved, right? To where you see cars in the second row. Again, you're seeing these cars are improvements on the cars in the first row, but they're still kind of similar. And then we have the modern era, which is the bottommost grid. Where today, if you look at cars, right, you can get a car in any flavor. You have sedans, you have hatchbacks, you have SUVs, you have station wagons or the equivalent, which is Innovas. You can get a car based on your personality, based on which color you choose, red, pink, blue, turquoise, teal, whatever you want, you can get a car, right? So that's the car industry. Let's look at another completely different industry. This is the smartphone industry. Now, if you guys remember, and I'm sure all of you remember, in the early 2000s, up until 2007, this is what the industry looked like. Again, you could get a phone in any color, any shape. You had flip phones, you had oval-shaped phones, you had phones which would open horizontally. I used to have a Nokia Engage. Just random quick show of hands. Who else has heard of or had an Engage? Okay, wow, that's a lot of you. And if you guys have heard of it, you remember what that phone is like, right? So to answer a call on the Engage, I would have to hold it like this. Literally, it looks like a big ear is sticking out of my very awkward phone. But the point is, you could get a phone for any different use case, right? This changed, though, when Apple introduced the iPhone in 2007, right? That's when Apple basically introduced something that was substantially different from a technology point of view. But up until here, around 2007, the industry had matured and design had taken over because, for any particular person's need, it was design that was convincing him to buy into that particular product. So what's common between these two industries, right? So this is a simplified curve. There are, fancier versions of this. But essentially, if you take any industry, it goes through a curve where initially, right, some kind of breakthrough technology happens. That technology goes through a gestation period. It improves, it improves, and it keeps improving, right? So that's the period when, you see that period marked as new and improving at the very bottom. After a while, it starts maturing because, the advancement in technology kind of start tapering off, comes, less and less frequently. And towards the very end, there's a decline, right? Now, most industries are in the maturity phase, where in terms of technology, you're seeing improvements, but they're mostly along, similar lines. And when that happens, differentiation starts moving to other kinds of things. Price, which, we heard a lot about today. Customer service, we heard a lot about today. And there's design, right? Design is basically catering a product to a particular human being's needs, right? And that starts mattering more, right? And the reason I wanted to do this kind of an introduction is because we've seen this has happened in the past for smartphones. I believe it's again happening for smartphones, again consolidating. This has happened for cars. It has happened for your industry as well. And it's extremely important for all of you guys to recognize the value of design and the kind of value add you can add to design. So, now talking about persuasion, the fundamental base of persuasion is creating something that has good design. After that, we'll talk in this presentation about other kinds of levers you guys can employ to create behavior change. But the very base is you need to create a product with great design, right? So what does great design look like, right? Let's start by looking at something that is not great design. Again, something all you guys have used. Microsoft Word. Okay, have you guys ever tried expanding all the toolbars? So to a new user, right, Microsoft Word is very, very overwhelming. Now don't get me wrong, Microsoft Word is a phenomenal product. So as a product manager, I completely love the kind of innovation they put in the product. But at some point in that, the evolution of the product, it just got really, really complicated. And it became that, right? So the last time I counted, so I counted because I couldn't find stats for this on the internet. I actually counted every feature. This one software has more than 250 plus features. That's insane if you think about it, because think about it, right? Essentially for a software that's supposed to help you put your thoughts and save your thoughts, that's the end goal really. You have 250 plus features, right? And somewhere along the way, it got really complicated. Here's a fun fact, right? Microsoft Research actually did this exercise where they called customers into their offices, customers of Microsoft Word, and they asked them, okay, in fact, the product management did it, so it's my tribe that did this exercise. What features do you guys want to see in the next edition of Microsoft Word? And here's what happened. Over 90% of the features that customers said they wanted were already in Word. Okay, now that's really, really ironic because here customers are saying, I want these features, but they're already in Word, right? So there's a huge, huge discovery problem with Microsoft Word. This, in fact, directly led to the development of the Ribbon, which is the latest interface that you guys are using. Again, I personally love the product for the kind of challenges it took on, but at some point it became really, really complicated. So what is not good design, right? So if you break it down, good design is not simply adding features the moment you think of it. You have to deeply question every single feature, because every single feature you add, right, there is a cost to it, and that cost is cognitive load for your user. You might not realize it because we've reached a stage where it's easier to build features, right, than not to build features. And it's important that everybody takes hard calls. So simply adding more features does not lead to good design. Simply adding more settings. Every time a customer comes, this is really important to you guys. Every time a customer comes, and if you have a product, try to resist the urge to basically introduce a separate customization for that one customer, because while you might get the revenue from that customer, it's going to come back and add complexity for your customers at large, the entire group of them. More use cases. Again, take very, very hard calls on which use cases you want to cater to. What is good design? So this is an app that does really well in the US. Some of you might have already seen or heard about this. This is Square Cash. Square is a player in the payment space in the US. They try to make it simple for users to pay merchants. So instead of a merchant investing X amount of money in a traditional POS setup, and it's called an EDC machine, but that's a device on which you swipe a card, Square provides them a simplified mobile-based way to accept money. On the user's end, again, Square provides users also a way to basically add their money and transfer it from one friend to another friend. Look at the screen, right? So this is a dedicated app they launched, which is supposed to do just two things. Allow me to basically send money to you, and allow me to ask you to send me money. Again, there's no ambiguity on the screen. You land on the screen, you know that you're expected to enter money, and there's only one question asked of you. Do you want to ask the other person for money or send money to the other person? Again, this is something where it's it's actually really easy for the product team to have cluttered the screen up, right, by adding X number of use cases. They've done the hard job of looking at exactly how users might use this app and saying no to a whole bunch of things. So they've said yes to the 20% of use cases that will give 80% of value. And we see this on and off. It's a principle that's often abused, but at least in product management, it holds true to a large extent. A few use cases are really the ones that most customers want. And if you do a great job in just those, the 20% of use case, you've got that customer on board. This is another way to describe great design. So this is, in fact, he's a VC with something called Redpoint Ventures in the US. Really, really smart chap. When I came across this tweet, I fell in love because, for the longest time, there was this thing about, okay, how do I define great design, right? And this thing hit it for me. Great design, I completely agree with this, is telepathic. It's like that friend who, that friend knows what you're thinking and directly answers to, whatever's on your mind. That's great design, right? From a human point of view. If your UI, if your software can do that, where a user has a particular intent, comes on it, and doesn't have to struggle to basically express his intent, he just finds what he's looking for. That's great design, right? And what leads to this? Again, thinking through use cases, taking hard calls, saying no. That's what great design is about. Now we've talked about, so we're talking about how to build persuasive design, right? And we've said the very first step to persuasive design is just simple good design. Get that right? Because the moment you do that, customers automatically basically ascribe trust to you, ascribe authenticity to you, and know that, and ascribe desire to you. They want to use your product or service. But that's the base. Can we do better? We can do better, for sure, right? Design for behavior change. Just quick show of hands. How many of you guys have heard of these books or read these books? Either one? Okay, awesome, which means all you guys have an opportunity to actually go get these books and read them. The book on the left, it's called The Psychology of Influence. It's one of the Bibles of the space, Bibles of persuasion. It's written by a gentleman called Robert Cialdini. So he's a professor of psychology at Stanford. And everybody from the world's greatest entrepreneurs to product designers to marketers, all of them have read this book and hold it in very, very high regard. So today what I'll be doing is dissecting some of these principles. We've used them in the past to great success and show you guys how you can use it in your software, in your products. The book on the right is a newer book. It's by a gentleman called, I forget the name now, Robert Thatcher or something such. It covers a bunch of principles which are not covered in the original book, of which we'll also talk about, right? So what are these principles? So this is a small subset of the principles, but these are the ones I wanted to talk about because I think they contain the most bang for the buck. There are a bunch of others as well. Scarcity, authority, social proof, and nudges. Let's just look at them one by one. So scarcity. So what is scarcity? It's actually a fairly commonsensical notion, once you think about it. As humans, we tend to ascribe more value to things which are scarce than things which are abundant. This is backed by several different research studies, but one in particular I want to talk about. So around 1975, there was a study that was conducted by Cialdini and his team in the US. So what they did is they got two exactly identical glass jars, okay, so completely identical. In one glass jar, they placed 10 cookies. In the other one, they placed 2 cookies. Now they called 2 sets of people, and they asked them how much are you willing to pay for 1 cookie, the first set in jar 1, and the second set in jar 2. Now if you think about it, the cookies are exactly the same, the jars are exactly the same. So logically, rationally, the same value should come out from these 2 groups. However, what happened is the group that basically put a value to the cookie in the jar with only 2 cookies, that value was much higher than the value ascribed to the jar with 10 cookies. Because as humans, we ascribe value to scarcity, right? Let's look at how this can be used in UI design or UX design or product design, right? So this is an e-commerce store. It's a Dutch e-commerce store. Very similar to a Myntra or an Amazon. You have a product detail highlight on the left. You have the sizes on the right, and you have the ability to add your product to the cart on the bottom. That's the CTA in orange. Now, they wanted to improve their conversion, so they got in touch with a local firm. So it's a Dutch conversion optimization firm that they contracted, and they gave them the goal of, okay, can you guys help us improve conversions on this? Now, the firm did multiple things, but in particular, they did one thing which I want to talk about. So if you look carefully, right, do you see what's changed? At the very bottom, the firm just added this one ticking counter. And the counter said, if you buy this particular jacket within X amount of time, you get delivery for the next day absolutely free, right? So what they did is they introduced scarcity in the form of time, right? That this offer, I'm interested in this jacket, but this offer is only available for X amount of time, right? If I don't act on this right now, I won't get next day delivery for free. With this one change, it directly led to around 9% more sales for this page, simply by using scarcity. This is one example, right? Just before we move on, but there are other ways you can use scarcity as well. What are these other ways? So if you remember, Groupon in the early days was just flash sales. You would come on, and again, they would show you one product that's selling at a really cheap price for just that day. Scarcity. Scarcity because, again, scarcity of time. It's only available for that day. The other kind of scarcity, though, is if you've seen Amazon on the same lines, you might have seen only 2 items left, right? Now, I have friends in Amazon. At some point, I intend to badger them till they tell me whether it's a UI trick or whether they're really running, really that low in inventory. Because this is Amazon, they have warehouses all over India, right? But that particular line really does work.
You see, all the mobile companies are also like doing the same thing, the flash sales.
Yes, exactly. And I have a disclaimer at the end, which is, please use all this stuff ethically. We have that obligation. But if used well to generate behavior change, it's a very, very powerful set of tools.
Scarcity or this something?
Limited edition is completely scarcity. For example, Apple did it for a genuine cause, I would like to believe, but if you remember, they released the red iPhone, okay, and they did it for AIDS promotion. That's a classic example of limited edition scarcity where it sold out. Only thing is they did it for genuine reasons because they knew the tool they were using, but all that money went to charity. But that's an example of that. Next principle, authority. Authority, again, is very, very simple. As humans, we ascribe more value to something which has been given the stamp of approval by either a person or an organization we hold in authority. What does that mean, right? For example, this is, so I'm guessing all you guys have seen Kaya's clinic centers, across the city because they're across India. This is Kaya's landing page. Very, very straightforward landing page. It talks about the benefit of the particular service, and it talks about, okay, if you want a consultation, here's a lead gen form, please fill it, and we'll get in touch with you. Very, very standard landing page. Again, they got in touch with a digital agency to improve conversions on this page, right? The agency did multiple things, but I'm isolating just one thing that I want to highlight. One of the changes they did was the following. So watch carefully. Do you see the line that says for free consultation, for skin consultation, register here? It's at the very bottom. It's a header above the forms, okay? They changed that to, I want an expert opinion, sign up here. That's the only change they did, right? That led to 130% more leads converted, just that one change. Now, if you think about it, they're not lying, because earlier also you were getting an expert only. Who else is there, Kaya? They're all skin experts, right? All they did is make it obvious, and that's that one change led to 130% more sales. So this is the power of understanding how people think, understanding behavioral cues, and using it correctly, because they've not done anything unethical. You were getting the same offering before, they've just made it more obvious in a way that gets you to notice it. Before we move on, other examples of authority. Testimonials are a classic example of authority, customer testimonials. Now, there's one thing about testimonials I do want to call out. A lot of sites which put up testimonials, they don't think deeply enough about the content of the testimonials. They think if I put a testimonial up, my job is done. But a testimonial really is most powerful when it's similar to the concerns and thoughts and benefits that me as a user, who are users, is looking for. So for example, if a small business is coming onto your SaaS app, let's say it's an accounting app, right? And they see your landing page. For them, a testimonial by another small business, right, is much more valuable, connects much more, gives much more proof than a testimonial by, let's say, freelancers. Because subconsciously or consciously, the person who's making the decision on behalf of the small business is thinking, okay, freelancers probably have different needs, it might work for them. For my small business, it doesn't work because I have different needs. So take some time out to craft your testimonials accordingly, and it works much, much better. There are tools and frameworks I use personally to craft some of these things. I'm more than happy to share. I've deliberately left them out because I didn't know if Sridhar's going to give me enough time. So I'm happy to share them. Social proof. Social proof is similar to authority. The difference between social proof and authority is authority figures, they're known, they're acknowledged by multiple people as being an authority person, authoritative organization in that space. Social proof is your peers, right? Social proof, in fact, is one of the most popularly used behavior change tools on the internet. Now, what is social proof? Here's one example. How many of you guys heard of Basecamp? Just a quick show of hands. Awesome. And if you're tracking Basecamp, it's a company I have tremendous respect for, because not only do they create great software, they also write about the craft. So if you guys are curious, you really should read their blogs, because they think deeply about the space we're all at, and they happily share a lot of that insight. So this is Basecamp's landing page, right? There is social proof over here. Can anybody take a stab at telling me where the social proof is? It's fairly obvious. Fourth word, perfect, in the headline, perfect, right? So here you go. Right up in the headline, they're going, every week, just last week, over 5,300 companies signed up for Basecamp. How powerful is that? So imagine, I'm a small business person, I'm looking for a project management tool for my company for various different reasons. I land up on Basecamp. The first question, or one of the most important questions I'm going to have is, okay, so who else is using this? And right at the very top, they've tackled that question head on. How powerful is that? Oh, this is another company. Booking.com is a genius at persuasion tactics. This company, if I had to basically take one company who's exploited every single tactic in the book, it's Booking.com. Booking.com is also a slightly cautionary tale in that there's a risk of overabusing these, but I cannot deny that they're extremely good at what they do. So if you look at this one page, so I've searched for Goa. I'm seeing a list of properties in Goa. In one page, I'm seeing 4 different types of social proof. So if you look at the top, there are ratings. So I know, hey, this property can't be bad because X number of people have given it 5 stars. On the top right corner, I'm seeing, okay, an actual numerical score to it as well. Hey, it's 7.5. I mean, how good is that? Bottom and bottom left and total bottom, I'm seeing, okay, this property was last booked 3 days back. This property was just booked. There's so many signals hitting me that it's very, very hard for a customer to not book one of these properties. And they don't stop here. They use every signal in the book. So if you want to go to one place to learn how to use these techniques, it's Booking.com. But please use them sparingly. So that's just a word of caution. The last principle I want to talk about is nudges. So this is some of the newer thinking in the space of behavioral design that's coming out. A nudge is a fairly, again, all these principles are simple, so you'll hear me describing all these principles as commonsensical, but it helps to call them out because it gives people ideas. So a nudge is the following, right? The user anyway wants to do something, right? But they don't end up doing that particular action for various reasons. They might think, chodo, I'll do it tomorrow. Or they might think that, okay, you know what, just too much work for me. The intent is there, but they don't end up doing it. So a nudge is just your way of pushing them along that right path, okay? Here is an extremely famous example of a nudge. It's not software. Okay, so here's the backstory to this, right? This is kind of fascinating when I came across it the first time. Amsterdam's international airport had the following problem, okay, which every international airport has. In the men's urinal was extremely filthy, okay, because men, as we all know, can't aim straight, okay. And this is not cool because you don't really want to spend too much money and administrative effort to keep your bathrooms clean. So they tried this experiment where they painted the picture of a black horsefly on the urinal. So that's not a real fly, it's just a photo, right? So they did this on the urinals, and this is the data that came out. Reduce spillage, so that's a term, it's a polite term. Reduce spillage by 80%, just a little act. So that's the kind of impact behavioral design can have. Actual valuable money being saved because you've reduced spillage. Behavioral design can also be done poorly. Here's an example where I was taken a bit too far, right? So that's a urinal that's making its way through the bars of Brazil. Okay, so what is that? Essentially, you have jets at the bottom. Again, forgive me, I take these examples to illustrate a point, so no offense if anybody considers it slightly unbecoming. But as you cross the streams of water, you generate musical notes, okay, akin to the strings of a guitar. This is really bad because over here you actively encouraged spillage, right? For lack of a more colorful way of saying it. If you picture in your head, it's the worst design I've come across in recent times, okay? It's fun, but you've directly contributed to spillage. So this is how not to do behavioral design. Okay, we've talked about nudges in the real world. This is how, this is an example of a nudge done in software. Basecamp again. So when you basically sign up for a Basecamp account and you land up on Basecamp, most other project management tools would land you up on a blank screen. They might give you a copy or two, but for a fresh user, you're left with a sense of being overwhelmed. There's all this stuff, you don't know how to get started. Basecamp, very clearly, there's no ambiguity about it. The big arrow that points to the big, a green plus button in the top left that says, get started creating a new project. There is no ambiguity in terms of what they expect a new user to do, right? And this completely helps a new user get started. In fact, we personally would have gone ahead and improved the copy a little bit further. For example, you can do things like give people ideas on what kind of projects to create, because that's also a point of drop-off. There are people who say, chodo, I can't think of like the way to structure my project, kal karunga. So, they can take it further by, actually putting ideas into a customer's mind as well. Okay, so we've talked about how the base of great persuasive design is good design. We've talked about how after you accomplish that, there are tools that you can use to increase the persuasiveness of your design. Can you do even better? Absolutely, and this gets into the space of branding. Now, I don't have time, unfortunately, to talk about branding, so I'd love it if Sridhar lets me talk again. And the next time we meet, we'll have a full-on session on branding. But this is what I wanted to share with you guys on persuasion and persuasion in design. And thank you for your time.